Great, and we've got some fresh batteries in here as well. Okay, you know, we have a bit of a hot seat scenario here, guys. So everyone, thank you for sticking around. This is the Web3 development panel. It's going to be a very exciting one. I just want to gauge the room. How many developers have we got in the room today? Okay, so we've got a pretty solid group of developers here. So I've got an exciting opportunity for you guys. While Lazar makes it up, someone is going to have access to this seat. Does anybody want to come up and join the conversation? I'm interested to know. Someone must want to come up. Yes, there we go, bro. Come on up. Round of applause, guys. So, you want to just intro yourself as you come in, Ben?
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks, guys. Hopefully I didn't talk too much nonsense. Yeah, I'm Ben. I have been in the blockchain space now for a couple of years. I've worked for Bitpanda, a centralized exchange in Austria. I currently work for Kima Finance. Was actually busy deploying mainnet yesterday. That seems like it's up and running successfully, so stoked about that. And yeah, essentially what we're doing currently is interoperability between various blockchains that obviously cannot talk or communicate with one another, and we're doing so minus smart contracts. So obviously that's mitigating a massive risk that institutional players are quite keen on, and one of our largest partners currently is MasterCard. So hopefully we can bring some liquidity into the space.
I love it. You went straight in for the shill, you know? I knew he would. I had a feeling about it, but no, it sounds like an exciting project. Hopefully we get time to talk about it a bit more. So I'm going to dive into these questions today, guys, because we've got 10 questions, and of course questions from you as the audience. So let's jump in, because the evolution of Web3 development has come quite a long way. But I'm interested to know, do you think we're hitting the goals of the early days of user empowerment, or do you think we've kind of gone a bit skewed, really? So I'm going to ask you first of all, Mark.
Hey guys, yeah, that's a tough question. I think we really have to strike the balance, and many teams take a little bit of a shortcut, right? Like we have this massive dilemma of usability and UX in the Web3 space. You know, like many of us know the pain of interacting with blockchains. I think it's pretty much unthinkable to onboard, I don't know, parents or grandparents at this point. So we kind of have to strike the balance, right? Like we want to optimize for UX, but we still want to keep the original values. I think like quite recently we've kind of drifted a little bit more to prioritizing UX over decentralization. And that is maybe a trade-off that can be done temporarily, but I think eventually we have to be careful that we don't go in the same direction as we did, you know, like with many centralized services, FTX and everything, you know, like where there's a massive backlash, maybe a huge loss of funds for many retail users, and then eventually it sets the entire industry back again.
Yeah, so I can go on next, I think. Yeah, I also think that there's been a lot of progress done in the space up until now, if it was to compare it to moment zero, right? But I do feel like there's still some work that's needed to be done as well. But I think like in terms of DeFi and dApps and everything that's been built, I think we're on the right path, and I feel like all those are pushing for decentralization. And also in terms of user empowerment, I feel like there's been a lot of progress there as well, and we've removed some intermediaries, and we are giving people more ownership of their own assets and stuff, and I think we're on the right path. But yeah, I think it's a lot of work still to be done. And in terms of technicals, I think that as well we are on the right path with different tools and also infrastructure, and I feel like all those are more advanced and powerful than they used to be before. So yeah, I think we're on the right path.
It looks like I'm sitting on a panel with optimists here. I like that. You know, always looking at the silver lining, I think, is important in this space. And what are your thoughts, Ben, jumping in on this first question here?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, right? So I think the amount of VC that we're seeing coming into the space now, especially just having attended the previous VC chats, is sometimes money blows the lines, where people are like, I just want to release a token to make as much money as I possibly can. And that kind of takes away from the ethos of blockchain and decentralization as a whole, which is a bit unfortunate. But I mean, hey, as long as we can onboard more people into the space, I'm not entirely against it. That being said, adding on to what Rebeca's added, in terms of like infrastructure and things like that, though, we're definitely making massive progress. It's so much easier today than what it was just even a couple of years ago for someone like myself. I mean, even if you're not a developer, like get a little Raspberry Pi and run like a Bitcoin Lightning node in your apartment, and like actually being part of the network and adding to that decentralization that we want to have. So I think there's good actors and there's bad actors, and we just need to try and make sure that we have as many good actors as we can in the space.
It's such a valid point, Ben, because when you really think about it, with all the no-code toolkits out there as well, you don't need to be a developer to create smart contracts these days. And that's actually an interesting one for you guys. So we have quite a lot of developers in the room, but who's actually a non-developer that's utilizing no-code toolkits, whether it's Alchemy or Bonsai 3? Is there anyone out there that's currently doing that? Because maybe this is what we need to tap into, how those platforms can have a user experience that's matched up with a Web2 organization. So this is actually me jumping into the next question, guys. And I think what's important, you guys, all of you touched on it actually there in terms of the balance between decentralization and user experience. And I think what roadblocks are currently stopping us from sort of this ultimate onboarding of people from the Web2 space, through the right user interface. And what are your thoughts on how we can maybe better that whole process?
Okay. I think what many teams are already trying is, like getting rid of the self-custody part of it, right? Like securing keys with, I don't know, social accounts and all that kind of stuff. So that's a first step to address more the average user. We got to ask ourselves, like if we just offload the trust now to, like one, I don't know, social login like Google or something, I'd say at least that's problematic. If we maybe take a consortium or something, we are better, but it definitely doesn't have anything from the original ethos we had, like everyone owns their keys, not your coins, right? So it's kind of like we're moving in the right direction. There are many things that are getting deployed. I think we have to distinguish, like securing, are we securing, like all of our savings or an NFT sort of an online game, right? Like there are definitely like nuances here, which, like we may not need the hardware wallet for every case. But I think it's important to really understand, for the people that are joining this space, to understand where it comes from and that it is okay to take shortcuts for certain things. Still some things we want to make sure that we actually own these keys.
Adding on to what Martin said, I definitely agree. Like abstraction is one of the most important keys to get people that are uncomfortable. Because I mean, hey, it's not a simple process trying to buy crypto. It really isn't. Like even as a developer in the space, like it's effort, it's tedious. And if we want mass adoption, we're not going to see that until it becomes a lot easier for the everyday. Like if my grandmother should be able to buy crypto quite easily. And like until we get there, unfortunately, we're not going to see the adoption that we want to see. I mean, luckily my grandmother's pretty tech savvy, but still. That being said, the other part that needs to be added is also another element of abstraction, though, is what you mentioned, is gaming. And this was mentioned last year, is if you can get people to start like earning NFTs without them realizing that they're using the blockchain as an underlying technology, that is also how we can push mass adoption. So I think if we can continue coming up with some of these things, but again, as has been mentioned, like not your keys, not your coins, it's very paramount. Like we want that self-custody. So I think maybe just using the abstraction to get more people onto platforms, but then allowing those users, once they're a bit more comfortable using the technology, to be able to, for example, withdraw that NFT into their own self-custodian wallet.
Yeah, so I already have one, thank you. So I agree with both of you guys, and I think, yeah, in terms of challenges, I think there are both technical but also non-technical challenges that we may face. And as technical as you all said, like user experience, I think it's really important, and I think we can improve that. I think there's space for that improvement. I also think that I'm also a data scientist, so I've been working in this field, so I do feel like coding analytics friendly smart contracts is also important, because you get to understand your users, your user behavior. I think mostly in DeFi it's really needed, and I think it's a common practice in traditional finance. And if we can get that here as well, it would be nice. Also, I think maybe one challenge that we look forward to right now, and it's quite discussed recently, is maybe finding shared solutions, a shared standard for interoperability. You mentioned it as well, and I think that would be a huge development as well. And yeah, I think in terms of non-technical, I think like, as usual, maybe regulations and I don't know, the perception that the public has around Web3 development could be also a challenge. Yeah.
Amazing, loved your take there, and a data scientist as well. So I'm sure there's some interesting conversations to be had later. But I'm going to address the security issue a little bit later on in the questions. But you must be reading my mind because I'm about to ask about interoperability between blockchains and how really that will drive a unified Web3. At this stage, do you think that that is an easy process for us or do you think it remains a challenge even today?
I mean, it's definitely still very much a challenge. It's become a lot easier. There's quite a few protocols now that do have solutions for the interoperability space. I mean, even if we take a step backwards to before us approaching interoperability, even just like the EVM, us being able to take a token on Ethereum and transferring it to Arbitrum, for example, to have better gas fees. So I think that was kind of like step one for interoperability. And now today it is, because like another part of the whole interoperability question is, we want liquidity to be able to move around easily. If liquidity is not able to move around easily, that's a barrier to entry as well. Like, we need money, like, if I've just got my Bitcoin on my Bitcoin wallet, okay, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, so hopefully I'm not offending anyone here. But I want to be able to move my Bitcoin onto another chain, but I don't want to necessarily have a wrapped Bitcoin somewhere else, because if it's wrapped, then I'm relying on someone's smart contract and someone to be a good actor. And I think that is also a massive risk, because I don't want to have to trust a single entity when the whole point of decentralization is for it to be trustless. So it remains complex. We are seeing some more unique solutions that are coming to play, but I think as a whole, not just with regards to interoperability, is we do need to be patient and we do need to just continue building, and it's going to happen.
You go.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I do think it's an essential thing for us, and it's essential for the whole success of blockchain. And yeah, I think it's a development that we should pay attention to. And yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think interoperability is very at the core of Avalanche. So for the ones that are not familiar, Avalanche is a multi-chain system similar to Cosmos, Polkadot, or any of the others, right? Like, so interoperability between these layer one blockchains is very, very critical. And I think we are very aware of the challenge, and I think it's really important to reach, like interoperability that's especially across ecosystems, right? Like, funds, liquidity can travel within Avalanche L1 super easy and light and quick and secure, and all that is not an issue. However, like, how do we integrate third-party ecosystems now, like Solana or the layer 2 ecosystem? So that is really a challenge, and I think eventually, ideally, we will get to a point where all of that is abstracted away from the user. They don't really realize what chain they're interacting with, more than they need to for certain like security assumptions, but yeah, that would be kind of like the end goal.
Sorry, I just want to add one last little point. Thanks to both of your answers. So just to give you a bit more context of what Kima is doing, and what I think is so cool is, I mentioned we don't want to trust people because that's kind of defeats the purpose. So having different layer ones communicate with each other, that's a difficult problem. But what we can do is this is going to get quite technical, but we can deploy light client daemons on different blockchains to be able to verify that a specific transaction or transaction hash has taken place on a different chain. And if we can do that, we can have two chains, in theory, be able to communicate and verify things on a different chain. And with that at our disposal, what we can then go and do is we can build liquidity pools on both layer ones. So for example, I can have my USDT and my Kima coin in a liquidity pool on Avalanche, and I can have my Kima coin and USDT, or even USDC, a different stablecoin, for example, on Polygon. I mean, yeah, okay, let's not use Polygon, both EVM, on Polkadot, for example. And by doing that, I can now bridge, or bridge isn't the correct term, but bridge quotation marks, assets between layer ones without having to realize or rely on a centralized party. Because the liquidity pools, that's decentralized essentially. Like, obviously, we do have, I mean, it's semi-centralized if we look at what Terra did a couple of years ago. But still, it's a step in the right direction. And I do believe, like, there's no be-all, end-all. It's going to take iterations. And we're going to continue learning from each other's mistakes, and we're going to continue improving those solutions.
I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I think that's something that we're seeing now is different liquidity pools on separate blockchains that are allowed to, like you said, bridge, not bridge, in between those two ecosystems. And I think we need to see more of those. And that segues perfectly into the next question about, scalability solutions, layer 2 and beyond. And what do you think the game-changing solutions will be over the sort of next 5 years? And really to a point where maybe what we've failed in so far is that it seems like we're taking one step forward, 2 steps back at this stage, just with the regulatory side of this. But what do you really think will be the game changer on the scaling solution side over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very, very interesting thing to watch. I think no one knows the solution now. Otherwise, if I knew, I wouldn't be sitting here. I think so. What we think is, right now very strong. We see L2s and L1s. L2s obviously Optimism, Arbitrum really strong. L1s Avalanche are very strong. Cosmos SDK is really strong. And I think it really depends on what they need, right? Like both solutions are trying the same thing. We want to increase the available block space and therefore get it cheaper, right? Both solutions are doing it completely different, right? Like layer 2s want to inherit the security from the layer 1 and settle to the layer 1. L1s are saying it is easier, less complex. It is not as dependent if we just achieve the security on our layer 1. We are not depending on another layer. We are completely self-sufficient, and also from a compliance standpoint. So what we're kind of seeing right now is many crypto native teams that are especially in the gaming and everything, they are going to L2s. What we're seeing, many institutions are really moving to L1s, right? Like you could see JP Morgan, Citibank, they're all playing around with Avalanche L1s. And I think that's like interesting to watch. It's gonna be very, very, there are many nuances. And I think let's see what happens.
Yeah, so I also think that layer 2s and layer 3s are also essential for scaling. But I think in this context where there are tens of layer 2s and layer 3s, I think it's essential to think of scaling efficiently. And I don't think there's need for every project to be a layer 2 or a layer 3. I think just building great apps that drive adoption and are easy to interact with and are user friendly, I think that should be enough, and as long as they drive adoption, that should be good. And one focus that you said what we think it should be, I think as I've mentioned before, maybe better focus on a shared standard that gets collaboration around all those layer 2s, and I think that's an important thing to develop right now.
Thank you. Yeah, scalability is obviously a massive concern, but it also depends like whose perspective we're looking at it from, right? So with scalability, there's kind of two things that we want to tackle. We want to tackle how many transactions or how many seconds does it take for a transaction to take place, and how many transactions can we fit into a block? And those are, there's massive debates in the Bitcoin space of like, let's increase the block size, like how many kilobytes it is, and there's a lot of people who are very much against that because like that's not really solving the underlying issue. But I think when we move to a point where we're using crypto on the daily, like you're just buying your groceries with stablecoins or paying your rent, whatever the case is, if we then need to try and comprehend the amount of transactions and volumes that we're going to be seeing on chain, it's going to be massive. And I don't think we've got the technology today, or no one's come up with a solution just yet. But mentioning what Rebeca mentioned, we definitely do need some standards. And EVM in and of itself is a bit of a standard, and we're definitely seeing that it's pretty massively adopted in that regard. But then to address the scalability question, we also need to think, adding on to what, sorry, I'm still learning everyone's names, Martin said, is like JP Morgan, Citibank, like they're all working with layer 1s. And that's because they want security, but they don't mind paying gas fees. If I'm moving $100 million, I don't mind paying $30 in gas fees to be able to make my transaction succeed. But like yesterday, I wanted to get a free hoodie, and I needed to own some MIM, and he was like, you just need $1, and I was like, okay, but it's $30 to perform the transaction on Ethereum. Like I can buy this in the shop for this value. It's not a win-win situation in this case. So we need to think about what's going on, and we kind of just need to try and standardize things as much as we can, but whilst still not stifling innovation.
Absolutely. I think it's really strange when you think about the last sort of 10 years in the space and how almost blockchains were, you know, hoarding liquidity to themselves, but we really do need to find a middle ground where, you know, those regulations are in place and we can share the liquidity, like you said, and transfer. And I think the rise of different Web3 wallets now, you know, omni-chain, multi-chain wallets, and having access to exchanging our funds in those, you know, not on the centralized exchanges, I always say, and, you know, until more recently, they were kind of the only options when you're trying to, you know, bridge those tokens. So I think what I'd like to jump into now is really at the core of these ecosystems and the smart contracts themselves. And of course, there's issues that will arise. So I want to ask you guys about the issues that smart contracts present in the modern day world of where DeFi is going and the limitations that they may have as we start to scale these different ecosystems.
Yeah, I think first of all, smart contracts are incredibly inefficient, right? Like that is just how it is, right? Like if we were to build the business logic directly in the virtual machine, we would have a lift of at least 20x. So I think that's kind of like the first problem. So I think what we will see in the future is a lot more purpose-built virtual machines, meaning blockchains that run one application and one application only. So we are at Ava Labs very excited about that, to see kind of like a first DEX that doesn't work on a general purpose virtual machine like the EVM, but actually has all the virtual machine stuff built in. But I think, and that really takes us to the thing, because what you mentioned about the institutions, right? Like they are looking, of course, like some of these institutions are doing today, you know, like these kind of like PR transactions, you know, like moving some fund or whatever. But actually many of the institutions are also considering blockchain for their day-to-day business. And then it's not, you know, like super high value transactions once a day, but actually, you know, like 400 portfolio rebalancings per second. And then we have a problem if that costs $30 every time. So they will move on their own chains, at least for internal processes and settlement between them, I'm pretty sure. Eventually even off smart contracts into into special purpose virtual machines. But it's really like an early, it's very early for the institutions, many of them doing pilot customers so far. So we want to really see, you know, like how they do that and how we can help them do that in a way where they're future-proof and interoperable with other blockchain ecosystems, especially EVM ecosystems.
Yeah, very interesting points. I completely agree. I think, maybe it's more so I hope that we see a new solution, because like you mentioned, smart contracts, like, yes, they gave utility to blockchain, because previously like, it wasn't really that useful. And now we've got that utility, but at the same time, like, if we look at all of the hacks, and like hacks is massive negative PR for us as people in Web3. If we look at that, it's 9 times out of 10, it is a smart contract exploit. So what do people do? Like, we only try and keep our smart contracts as lean as possible to decrease the amount of gas required to execute the smart contract. But at the same time, we need to, I mean, okay, we've come massive leaps and bounds with regards to smart contract auditing. Like that's a massive thing now. Like you don't go out with your smart contract as, oh, hey, one dev checked this, okay, cool. Like, I mean, if you have like 100 mil TVL and that smart contract gets hacked, like cheers. So I think we do need to see like a smart contract 2.0. I think that would probably be the solution. So like I said, just to see what the future holds. But in terms of security, I mean, you know, I'm just coming back to the same point. I think people in the Web3 space, like most 9 times out of 10, is massive VC funding behind a new startup or a new coin or a new chain. And they've got the funds and the means available to be able to have their smart contracts audited. So I think just doing due diligence today to ensure that what is out there is as safe as possible, and then to hopefully inspire, I guess, the world and some of the people in this audience to try and come up with those new solutions and solve those problems that we're still currently facing today.
Yeah, so I think those were both great answers, and one thing that I could also emphasize on would be, yeah, the auditing and the whole security thing. Like, I think there's still work to be done there, and yeah.
Can I just add one thing? So I think talking about security, what we see at Avalanche is that hackers really shifting strategies, right? Like they were attacking smart contracts a lot, you know, and the whole industry of auditing arose. And actually what they found is recently that it is a lot more effective to actually target the front ends, because many users are just blind signing everything they get from the front end. So most of the exploits they do is not draining entire protocols, but tricking, like some users either by impersonating the front end, looks exactly the same, but doesn't belong to the protocol, or hacking taking over the front end. Because of the two reasons. If they drain an entire protocol, law enforcement will hunt them. If they steal from a few users, most of these users won't take legal action. If they do, they're not as experienced, they're not backed by like large, like chain analysis or whatever these protocols are all using. So most of the smart contract hacks we see today are mostly returned 90% by the hacker, 10% is kept as a white hat fee. Protocol is down for 3 days, everyone is panicked, everyone gets their money back. What we do see in practice is really bad is, like people, just my colleague yesterday, $3,000 gone, clicked on a link, tried to mint an NFT, proof of attendance, wallet drained entirely. Like, is he gonna press, take legal action? Probably not, So I think really what I wanna double down on is really, think about what you're signing, look at the front ends, verify, try to avoid blind signing, even though it's hard, and then, I think that is really the fix for smart contract security for today.
Yeah, I think you guys covered it all perfectly there. With the new kind of wave of security solutions that are coming in, and there is hope on the horizon. I like the way you said that, Ben. So I suppose it is naturally kind of flowing into the next part of this, which is always about regulation. Let's be honest, this space. If you're still in this space, by the way, after however long you've been here, you need to applaud yourself right now, because whether it's regulators or scams, and actually speaking of that, I always like to do this, but who in this room has been scammed in this space? Okay, yeah. You know what, I think people should talk about their scams a little bit more, because we all talk about how much money we make, but at the end of the day, it's really about supporting each other. On the other side of things, it's also great to know that there is federal agencies that are supporting us and regulating it in the way it should be. However, are they? Like, for example, if I say the name Gary Gensler right now, what do you guys feel about that? Obviously everybody hates him. They probably hate him more than Do Kwon, But my question is, do you think the regulators are really doing enough to sort of root out the scams that we're talking about, or the breaches, and do you think maybe they're targeting the wrong things? Just interested to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think regulation is necessary for adoption, unfortunately. So obviously MiCA is coming into effect at the end of the year in Europe, and essentially in a nutshell, what MiCA is enforcing is, I'm a user on a centralized exchange, you're a user on a centralized exchange, and now, for me to be able to send you crypto, both of us have to have KYC'd wallets. So my identity has to be linked to that wallet. So I can't be interacting with people whose wallets are not registered. So essentially, obviously this comes into a whole tax situation where they want to, it's been the Wild West up until now. People have gotten away with a lot more than what they should have. But in terms of regulation, obviously the US being as large of an economy as what it is, the SEC has massive power. And as you mentioned, we're not the biggest fan of Gary Gensler, interestingly enough, because what he's doing is, he's not like, okay guys, this is the regulation, this is how we can go forward. He's like, we're suing you because this is a registered security, and it's you. And it's like, but I've been coming, for example, Circle, they're like, we have been trying to engage the SEC to get the information, because we want to comply. But if you're not allowing us to comply by just enforcing, how are we going to get this? So this year's presidential elections in the US is obviously going to have a massive outcome on, or determine the future of regulation in the US, and as a result thereof, also I think massive regulation globally. So, but at the other side of the story is, and especially, I think it's slowly, the winds are slowly starting to change. But in the previous years, it's been a point of, we want to protect the retailer. That's the song they've been singing. But I feel that's not the case. There's been a lot done to deliberately stifle crypto startups, and with official TradFi banks that are backing crypto. Their lives have been made really, really, really difficult. So at the end of the day, are you really trying to protect me, or are you just saying that you're trying to protect me? So regulation is necessary, regulation is important, but we definitely do still need a lot of clarity with regards to what is defined as regulation.
Yeah, I also agree, and yeah, it's not an easy question, but I do think there's a need for it, and as long as we can keep a balance where innovation can keep ongoing, and in the same time the bad actors are are kept in place. I think that that's a good way of doing it. And yeah, I think it always is, and mostly in this case, I think it's good to keep a balance because otherwise you tend to see some, or you're subject to seeing some extreme things happening in the space that are not quite the nicest thing to see. So yeah.
Can't comment on regulation.
That's fair enough. You know, I respect that, and I want to touch on something you said there, Ben, because I think it's really spot on. Is that on the surface, what it seems like to us is they're just suing companies, making money for themselves, for these regulatory bodies, and they're not actually helping us, the little guy. And I think that's something that we can see around these certain pumps and certain phases of the markets. You know, for example, when the markets are in an upward trend and the scams usually skyrocket. And this is what I worry about, is I worry that as we go into this super cycle, that we will potentially be at risk of serious breaches, serious, on a consumer level, but also on a retail level as well. So I do worry about where the regulatory bodies are taking us and if they have our best interests at heart, because I really don't think they do. I mean, the fact that you still see the same Facebook scams or scams on Facebook now that are crypto scams is like maybe suggesting something. But at the end of the day, I think it's great to be hopeful and really hope that the government will protect us as consumer investors. But something I also want to touch on there is I've got a lot of friends in the US, and they say to me that the US will eventually bring in a legislation where you have to be a registered broker to hold any Bitcoin. And then what that would essentially do is mean that you need to go through the same regulatory process that any bank or any establishment goes through to then trade and hold even your Bitcoin in a cold storage wallet. So this is something very worrying to think about. If that happens in the US, I don't doubt that it'll take a couple of years to come to Europe, but it's something we need to really consider. Oh yeah, actually, I've got a question for the crowd, guys. So who here thinks that if Donald Trump gets in as president, then regulation will soften? And who here thinks if the Democrats get in, it will actually increase? So first of all, who here wants Trump to get in for crypto? Okay, we got a couple. Who here thinks the Democrats will destroy crypto? Okay, all right. Okay, I got some guys on my side here, yeah. But all jokes aside, it's funny how the political landscape can really shape what's going on in this space. So it's something that we're all eagerly awaiting is the election day, because normally off of my charts it's about 40 days, 39 days till the super cycle officially starts. Interested to talk to you guys after if you disagree with me. So let's move straight in, guys, to tokenomics and incentives, because of course that is what's really going to fuel the sustainable growth in the ecosystem. So tokenomics, they play a major role in driving adoption and developers in Web3. But how can developers design token economies that are both sustainable and aligned with long-term project goals? I like you're straight in on that, go.
No, I was about to have a short answer on this actually, so it's a good thing that I received the mic. So yeah, I think it's true that lately we've been seeing a lot of short-term incentivization, and yeah. I feel, although that we've seen this lately, I think there's a shift towards a more balanced way of incentivization, also tokenomics, and yeah, I think we're on the right path on that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think at the heart of sustainable tokenomics is thinking if you need a token, right? And for that, go back to why tokens were introduced back in the day, right? Tokens are a way to incentivize and disincentivize usage of a limited resource, right? That nothing else, right? Like most of the blockchains, you can think of it as a decentralized computer. It has a limited throughput, similar to the computer, in your pocket or at home. It can only run so much. You can only install so many applications on it. They invented the token to kind of like guard this computer from overusage, from denial of service attacks. So obviously there are different models, like also reward mechanisms and everything where you can incentivize community. What I think is many communities just launch a token for the sake of launching a token. So that usually doesn't end well, either for the users, sometimes not for the protocol. So I highly encourage every protocol to think first, if you really need the token, what is the whole plan after it? What do you want to incentivize? And if you don't know 100%, go back a step and maybe save yourself, your project, and your community from your token.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Martin. I think we're seeing today, especially not just in the blockchain space, but also in the AI space, is like everyone's just trying to chuck this buzzword and be like, oh, but we use AI for our product. And it's like, but do you need to use AI or blockchain for your product? So I think that's step one, as you've highlighted. But then coming over to tokenomics, I think like when I'm investigating a crypto project to determine whether or not this is something I want to invest in, like one of the first things I look at is the tokenomics. Like, what distribution of these tokens are going to the company that has created this? Like, if you're looking at 50% going to the company, I'm not buying your coin. Like, there's, even if it's super successful, like, that's just like, it's a rug pull waiting to happen. So I think we need to pay special attention to like, where's the tokenomics going? Like, is there going to be an airdrop for the community? How much is going towards marketing? How much is going towards VC? How much is going towards the developers? How much is going towards the executives? And understanding the tokenomics of the particular project. And then furthermore to that is like the whole airdrop process is, with airdrops nowadays, you're getting activity on chain, but also it's like, is this real activity? Because people are just trying to make bots to like try and farm your airdrops. And then it's like, okay, I'm a genuine user. I genuinely use this testnet because I do believe in the project. And then you get airdropped where it's like, it costs you more gas to get your airdrop than what you actually got value from the airdrop. So I think it's a very fine line, and companies or new chains or new coins coming out, they need to very seriously consider, but what are tokenomics and how do our tokenomics affect the opinion of retail and investment?
Absolutely, and stop sort of shooting. I love what you said at the start there as well, just shooting for profit-driven, economies. And I think once we start to do that, we can really come through to the next. I mean, I'm a firm believer that blockchain can help build a sustainable space, and I think that's what we're all looking for. The ones that are still here in the space and not driven by profit. So let's jump into that actually. So we've got 15 minutes left, guys. We're going to have some time for questions at the very end. But before we get there, I do want to have two last parts of this. I want to ask, first of all, to you guys, what are your respective organizations doing to really onboard and support? Because I think education is also a key part of this, the next sort of wave of people coming into the space. And then at the final part, we'll go a little bit more into how that's governed on a governance side. But initially, what do you think your respective organizations are doing to really drive adoption, and then, of course, support the new community that's coming in?
Yeah, at Avalanche we do Avalanche Academy, which is a free online platform. Anyone can enroll in it. It's all public. You don't even need to sign up. And there's a lot of learning content about tokenomics, what we just talked about interoperability, about the multi-chain thesis. So encourage everyone who's kind of like interested in that to check that out. And then I think like on the technical level, what you really have to do is you have to make it as easy as possible to onboard, right? Like we all know this. We want to check something out, and then we spend 1.5 hours just getting like a basic development environment to run. Very painful. Most of us don't make it. So what we really looking into is how can we make that a one-click experience without any, installation. So we're heavily focusing on, browser run development environments that just look as Visual Studio Code, but actually run in a browser on a server somewhere, not on your computer. So no installations and everything. So I think these are kind of like the two core components we do for developer onboarding. Lots of free education, and then on the other hand, easy development environment setup.
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head there. With regards to education, like the most important thing is documentation. Because if I'm trying to figure out how to use something as a normal retail individual or as a developer, like your docs is going to determine whether or not I'm actually able to use this at the end of the day. So thankfully to people like Avalanche, and also there's quite a few centralized exchanges that also have similar education programs where you can go and you can learn. I was actually chatting to a guy yesterday here at the conference, and he was saying how they've started using AI to help teaching people about crypto, such that you can be like, oh, but I want to learn about DAOs now. Like or combine DAOs with, for example, I don't know, just like normal companies, whatever. Poor example, sorry about that. But yeah, people need to be willing, because I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I was one of the individuals that got scammed. It was probably like the stupidest scam ever. In a nutshell, a YouTube video about arbitrage. And then the guy's like, oh, hey, like just put your funds there and you can deploy it onto the smart contract. And like I didn't check anything like chain analysis, whatever, to see, oh, hey, that's that guy's wallet. But I think when it comes to signing transactions, when it comes to interacting with smart contracts, when it comes to any of those things, like read. And it's definitely intimidating, and you're probably not going to understand what you're reading the first couple of times, but do persevere, because by persevering, you can slowly start to understand and grasp what it is that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, it's up to us to educate ourselves. We can't expect someone else to teach us.
Yeah, I also agree with those points. And what I also think that is good, just getting in there and talking about your what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, right? And also you mentioned documentation. I totally agree with that. And having as many learning resources, and it's always a good thing to have. I also think that having people satisfied with how you're doing things and having them talk about your products, that's also a good thing to have, and it keeps the level up. And yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, I think every ecosystem, every platform in the space has a duty to provide education, because if we can root out on the back end why the issue is happening, the scams will always be there. But if we can support people to see them and be able to do their due diligence to actually prevent them from happening, that's really going to be the game changer. And I think it's really interesting to talk about this now, actually, because Matteo, one of my friends, and I were talking about this last night about how we're not just trying to onboard new people to the space, normies. We're actually trying to re-onboard people that have been scammed and left the space. And I'm interested to know, for you and for your organizations, or even for maybe your direct network of friends, how big of an issue do you think that is? Because once someone has lost money in this space, I would probably go as far to say it's even more difficult to bring them back into it. And then what kind of are the challenges that we could, or some of the solutions that would allow us to kind of and obviously kind of circling back on education is going to be a huge component of that. But do you think on a regulatory side, there needs to be more done to prevent these scams from happening again? And also interested to know maybe some mechanisms that your organizations are using to prevent these scams from happening, whether it's having active community managers in place, or compliance issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, active community managers definitely are a massive thing. Like if you're in a particular ecosystem or even multiple ecosystems, like go onto the Discords. There's a lot of really useful resources there. There's a lot of people there that are trying to help you. And then also, like if you don't understand something, or if something sounds too good to be true, rather do not try. Like it might be like, oh, TVL, or not TVL, sorry, but like your APY for the year is like 100%. Don't click on it. It's not going to be the case. Like, just if it sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And then in terms of trying to get people back into it, like 100%, I think it's even more difficult to bring those people that have been scanned back into the space. But I think the way that we can do that potentially is, again, is decreasing barrier to entry. Like the easier it is for someone to get into the space, the less likely. I've got a lot of friends that are very into tech, and even them, like they haven't even bothered getting into crypto. Like they were like, I'll just use a centralized exchange, wherever the case is, because it's so much effort to try and go about things in a different manner. But yeah, again, education is so important with us, and then I think it's very difficult to establish trust. It's one of the most difficult. Like trust comes from time, so I think those of us that are in this space, we need to just try and encourage those around us to get involved and to tell them, oh, listen, like, if you use this exchange, they're very regulated, like your funds are protected, or don't go onto this, or be careful when reading, or like, for example, if you want to interact with any dApp, go onto their Twitter page, and they will tell you what the correct web address is. Because oftentimes, if there's like an M, for example, in the URL, someone would just re-register URL with an R and an N next to each other. And if you have a quick look, you're like, oh, okay, that's an M. And there, your funds are gone. So be careful, and then just trying to make the user experience and ability for non-tech savvy people to get on board a lot easier.
Yeah, I also think that mostly to this question, it kind of comes back to the user more, because you really, it's on you sometimes, and you have to ask questions, you have to do your diligence, right, and to just find out how things work. And yeah, for projects, yeah, it's good to have as many educational content and good documentation, and yeah, people satisfied with what you're doing there. But I think it comes down to the user, and to just stick with what you think is good to do, and yeah, just get yourself informed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, oh, just a loud one, wow. Yeah, so we'll have a little bit of time for questions, but before we do that, I really want to drop some alpha for the guys here. You know, we've got access to you, and thank you so much, Ben, for joining us on stage. You fit right in here, you know, and I think what's exciting is that it's about really learning from each other on these spaces. And I want to pivot back a little bit to the developer side of things. You know, what key areas do you think we need to look out for to allow, like we said, I mean, 90% of these breaches can be due to, you know, a smart contract. So what do you think on the developer side do we need to focus on coming into this next cycle, perhaps on the security side of things? And also, another thing I want to finalize on is what narratives do you think are really going to drive us forward to get the adoption and to get the sort of, we mentioned gaming earlier, and I think that's a really key area as a ex-gamer myself who doesn't have time to game anymore. But I think what I would be interested to know is, first of all, what we need to look out for this next kind of coming 6 months, because when you think about it, in around about 6 months, we're probably going to be coming out of this super cycle by, you know, next April or so. So yeah, let me know what you guys think on the developer side. And
yeah, so we at Ava Labs are specifically excited about decentralized physical infrastructure, right? Like abstracting away data centers so people can access them on-chain or any other physical infrastructure. We are really excited about gaming. We are very excited about governments moving on-chain, and we are very excited about enterprises moving on-chain. Is anyone building a company here, like early stage, maybe like less than 500K funding? Okay, nice. So if you're generally interested, we have an accelerator kicking off in a couple of weeks. In 2 weeks in Buenos Aires, $50,000 stipend, 7 teams pitch for $1 million prize pool after 10 weeks. So more than happy if you're building in any of these verticals or something adjacent, more than happy to chat after the talk.
Yeah, so for me, I think, yeah, DeFi, I really like that. But besides that, I think gaming, and also what I'm interested about recently is digital identity. Yeah, I think that's a good area as well that needs to be explored.
There were so many like sub-questions in that question. I don't know where to start.
I know.
But for example, regarding like developers, obviously Telegram is a massive instant messaging platform, and they've recently released, or recently, it's been out for a while, but Ton Network. They actually had a chat here yesterday. And there's so many people that are now getting involved in writing, I don't want to say smart contracts, but getting involved with blockchain as from a developer perspective, but without actually fully understanding Web3, because they have made that barrier to entry so much lower. They're making it a lot more like Web2 focused entry. So I think the like low code, no code, abstraction away, even from like the developer side, it's nice to bring new people into the space. But then also what I've noticed is like, I mean, I've been in Web3 development now for about 4 years. And when I came into the space, there were so few Web3 developers that like, even if you were very inexperienced, they were like, it's fine, like you know what blockchain is, like we're willing to hire you. And because it's becoming so much more mature, I mean, Bitcoin's well into its teenage years now, there's some very, very, very senior people in this space. So as a developer, try and join companies or go onto Discords where you can get exposure to those senior individuals, because they've made a lot of mistakes. And like you were saying with regards to scams, with any mistakes in general, like we want to learn from not just our own mistakes, but those mistakes of individuals around us. And then coming back into just briefly what the other two were touching on, in terms of like different sectors or spaces, like there's obviously like, I'm personally pretty interested and curious on blockchain from like an agricultural perspective. So for example, how me buying my apple in Lidl, I can be like, oh hey, I can use the blockchain to see like the supply chain of this, to see where it came from, things like that. So I think there's still a lot of use cases to be developed, but at the end of the day, like just coming back into starting something new is, whatever interests you. Like I grew up on a farm, that's why I like agriculture and blockchain. But if whatever interests you, just try and pursue that, because what they mentioned in some of the other talks is you want to have an idea that is unique, because then you're not competing against anyone else. So yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Oh, I think that's amazing. I think it is great to always focus on the things that make you passionate in life, and that's probably why we're all in this room together now, guys. When you think about it, is that 99% of the world, they're just focused on what they do, but we actually look beyond and try and learn new skills. And I think when you realize that, you kind of aligned, you're surrounded with other founders in the room that are also building their future. And I agree with you. I think we need to use blockchain to build something sustainable, that benefits us, and it doesn't just driven for profit, and that's exactly what this space isn't for me. So first of all, guys, that's us coming to an end. We've got 5 minutes left for a question. I know Tyler's got a question, but before I do that, I just want to get a big round of applause for our speakers here, guys. So we have about 2 minutes left. I'm sure we can go a little bit over if need be, but who has some questions in the room? Oh, perfect.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure really to see you talking about like web development, especially like I'm from a Web2 like let's say background, and so I wonder like you know Web2 is mainly like the base that we are in, and like Web3 is coming along and like we are riding the wave. How do you see the relationship between like Web2 and Web3 going along? Like you were mentioning, Ben, like from yesterday's talk about like Telegram, like Ton. So they integrated like with the wallet and you can use the APIs. So like what are like the, let's say the advantages and like the cons on this part?
That's a difficult question, Marco. I think it's about bridging the gap, but also you don't want to entirely bridge the gap because there's obviously some massive benefits and some pros towards Web3, and there's also some things in Web2 which I guess are beneficial to an extent, even though we're all maxis in Web3. But if you're someone that's in the Web2 space and you're trying to think how you can get into the Web3 space, I think a relatively easy approach or path for that is getting into like the front-end side of Web3. Because then you're still very much working in the Web2 space with like your technology stack, but you're starting to get exposure to communicating with like your RPC of this blockchain node, or being able to get like indexing a database or whatever, so that you don't have to do on-chain compute, you can do off-chain compute. But it is, yeah, I haven't really answered your question very well. I don't really know what else to say, so I think I'm going to hand the mic over.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as well, and I was thinking about me when I joined. And I started working as a data scientist, right? And I had a lot to do with block explorers. I was tracking transactions daily, and I was just being there. And yeah, that thing helped me a lot, right? Just understanding how things work, and it's, yeah, I think that's a good way of getting into Web3. Just being there and observing things and keep track of transactions and stuff like that. I think it helps. Yeah, maybe some other things as you mentioned, but yeah, I think this could be one as well.
Yeah, I think starting from the start, right? Like look at how Bitcoin works. There's a great course on Coursera from Princeton, I think, which is free, right? Like walk through it. It's funny to see, you know, people are like, I don't know, 10 years ago and talk about Bitcoin and everything early in the day. So go through that. Go through Crypto Zombies, which is kind of still the state of the art. EVM Solidity, kind of like in the browser learning. Move from that, you know, like learn Foundry, learn all this kind of stuff, and then, you know, like, but make sure that you're along the way not only learn stuff about the execution environment, especially only about the EVM, but also of the underlying layers, right? Like understand what consensus is, understand what Sybil resistant is, understand how it's different, you know, like really go through the entire stack to understand, you know, like what's really going on behind the scenes when you click this button that says send transaction.
I think it's a great question, actually, because when you really think about it, we're actually already past Web3 right now. We're actually in Web 4. So we're in the 5th generation of blockchain currently, and Web 4 is actually about leveraging, well, Web 5 is actually about leveraging AI, and Web 4 is about augmented and virtual reality. We're building the metaverse. It's already padded out. So it feels like we've been stuck on this latest iteration of the internet when you really think about it. So I think the important thing to see is that everybody on this side of the curtain, shall we say, is driving for innovation, and yet this system, the establishment, is stifling it. And that's something we can see with technology through the centuries. So what I would be a firm believer in is that one day it will become easier, and Web3 will, you know, in its full right. Because as it is, people are like, what is Web3? It's very, very simple what it is. You know, it's just us evolving, us being part of creating the internet. And the day that blockchain was launched, that was essentially the new way of us to communicate, to connect, even as a ledger for information. So what I do believe is that we're propelling forwards, and we're kind of getting pulled back in the same tide on the regulatory side, shall we say. But I would love to maybe delve into this a bit more, but we do want to get through some more questions. So, Tyler, I know you have a question. I know.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Tyler, and I made a studio called Easy, and that's just like a cultural thing to let's just say that blockchain is easy and see where we go from there. But like, all kidding aside, I don't know if you have any feedback on this, but like, we basically focused on front-end solutions like in a really, deep way, and so we built some security tools. And there's just like another sort of, like it's almost a Web2 scam that's going around that we've seen. So basically through job offers, people have like full on had their laptops totally hacked. And it's not even like an on-chain thing, but they are like going after the funds on laptops. So I just wanted to make people aware of that. Like because like, generally, I know not to, like all our friends know not to sign, transactions and stuff like that. But now it's like another step beyond of like just clicking this link and, downloading something. And then, but they are going after your Web3 funds. Like they're offering Web3 jobs, usually on Telegram. But, yeah,
I'm liking this. This is feeling like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, but about the crypto scams here, And I'm only joking. I know you do have a question in there, though.
I actually don't have a question. I just had to say that because it's like a security thing. So like, I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. And then if you have anything to riff on regarding like security again or whatever, but I know we're running out of time.
I like that. So this is why I nicknamed Tyler the Schiller. He loves to talk about his project, but no, all jokes aside, he's a very good friend of mine. We based in Lisbon, so if anyone wants to come and talk to us about, because I think we have opened up the room there a little bit with the scam side, so it's important to talk about these things. But I really do want to finish on a really positive note today, guys, because this has been an incredible couple of days. I don't know about you guys, but I've had the best time. It's truly an honor to be here on stage with other founders in the space and you as the attendees. I just wanted to say this one thing on a final note, but gravitate towards the things that you don't do well in the space, and you will, before you know it, you're going to really achieve everything that you put your mind to. Of course, focus in and double down on the things that you do well, but really, if you start to open up a little bit and learn from others, you're going to change your direction and your trajectory in this space, like before you know it. And then, you might be sitting, up here, and I'm sure many of you have had sessions today over the last couple of days. But let's see if we've got one more question, because I do see some eager faces out there. So is there any more questions here before we tie it off today? I can't see anything. No? You got a question, D? Okay, here we go.
Okay, so my question is, I am a creative person in the space, and I've always wanted to be a developer because it looks really cool, and I feel like I'm almost kind of like left out, not really understanding the development side of it. So it's a question for Rebecca. You're a woman, you're sitting on this development panel. What can I do to take my first steps as a developer? And hopefully next year by this time I can be like, hey guys, I wrote a smart contract.
Yeah, that's a nice question. I'm glad that you asked that. I think there are a lot of communities in Web3 that are, as you said, maybe woman-focused. And I think that should be a good start for you if you want to join some. And yeah, I think like basically just learning and you don't have to be scared if there are only guys there, right? Like it's okay, you can do your thing as well. So yeah, but if you want like to be in a group with women, I think there's a lot of these like there's Shifa and other. Oh, so you're on the right path, right? So yeah, but we can talk more about this if you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I am a male, but yeah, I think oftentimes we're a little bit scared to approach things because we're scared of failure, and we're scared that what happens if something goes wrong, like I don't want to go losing a bunch of money or whatever the case is. And I don't think we've really touched base on this enough, but at the end of the day, please people, testnets exist. Testnets are there to go play with. Testnets are there to make mistakes with. Like the whole point is to go and test your smart contracts out there. So use these environments, and then like as Rebecca mentioned, like there's these communities out there, like whether you're a woman in tech or a woman trying to get into tech, or whether you're just someone curious about the space, there's so many kind, eager people that want to help you out there. Just join Discord. Basically, everyone's got a Telegram and a Discord that's in the Web3 space. Go check out the website and just educate yourselves. Read, 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 read.
Yeah, the resources are there, and just following in on that, I think as well that the amount of technology that has these different Web3 toolkits, what it's given us is the ability to create smart contracts with no-code toolkits that you can launch on any mainnet actually. Testnet first though, yeah. But no, I think that's drawing it to an end, guys. Before we go, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for your for being so attentive on this today's session. I want to thank the organizers as well. These guys are working tirelessly day in and day out, even before we all arrived here, to make this a success. I think this has been one of the most engaged stages at the event. And I want to say a big thank you again to the speakers. So massive round of applause, guys, for Ben, for Martin, and for Rebecca.